Hey, we're middle of Paragimel. We're explaining in these prakim the difference between the way the Nefesh L'Kis understands and is inspired by godliness on its own, the way the Nefesh L'Tivis is, the way the natural soul or the animal soul is understands and is inspired on its own, and then the way that the godly soul comes into the animal soul. So when you have the light of the godly soul shining into the Nefesh L'Tivis, into the animal soul, what is the difference if they're both coming from the same hisbaininus? A person's learning something and they can learn it and be inspired only on the level of the animal soul or on the level of the godly soul. What's the difference between them? So we explained that the godly soul's inspiration is really not from the understanding, it's really a godly thing. It's just being awakened by the understanding, as opposed to the nefesh tivis, the natural soul, is only being inspired by the intellect of the idea itself. So we're going to delve a little more into this now. But first, yesh lahakdim b'masha anu royim. We need a little introduction about this phenomena that we see. Davar hafle v'fela, this wondrous, surprising thing. B'shinoi oifen hispailos b'nefesh elikis b'hasoga denefesh ativis. And we see that when it comes to the way that the godly soul is inspired and awoken and aroused from an understanding that's taking place in the nefesh tivis. So when a person learns something with human intellect, they, in simple terms, a person's learning Chassidus or they're learning, thinking about God's greatness or these kind of things. We can see that there's two very different reactions that can happen in terms of the godly soul. One person has this sensitivity that they right away are able to appreciate the essence of the idea. Blushing Yiddish, nikra der Hert kulu. They right away feel how what they're learning is something that's personally relevant and it's something that they personally experience. Mitzad hezber hasoga atzma, danu pnei roiv hezber dvorim ham mut'amim b'tuv tam b'seichel anushi ad shenitvas u'miskabel hetev vikar hispailusay min hahezber levad. But even though this person is being inspired and he does feel that it's personally relevant and he's able to actually relate to it, but it's mainly because of the logical explanation, because it's explained very well in human intellect until he really grasps it. And that's his main inspiration is from the idea, the logic itself. But there's another type of person. They right away sense and are inspired by the godliness of the idea. And they have much greater sensitivity to this. And the sign, it's not just that the person, some people are just emotional and they right away get inspired by things, even if it's very surface level. But the sign that this is actually coming, the person has this keen sensitivity, is that they right away get the point to the extent that they could explain almost the whole explanation on their own. So they could not only, like, they could write the book, they don't have to understand it from the book, they could explain it to you, and they're writing mechavin to what it's going to say further in the explanation because they understand. Because right away he's latching on, he's getting inspired by that godly essence, and so he really gets it. And like a good example of this is the difference between when an adult is explaining something to a child. So you could explain to them, let's say, why it's good to do something or bad to do something. Like Rambam's example, you're trying to explain to a child they should want to learn to read and things like that. And so you can give all kinds of external explanations of the different benefits, but the real essence of it is the intrinsic value of it. And so somebody that's mature right away sees that, and then yeah, they can apply and see all the other side benefits as well and give different justifications for it, as opposed to somebody that's just understanding those external things. And because they right away appreciate the godly essence, the depth of the idea, they're able to give many explanations with no end to the length, the width, and the depth. Like he explains in Sharicha, the meaning of that they're able to explain it very simply in different mishalim to a small child. They're able to see how the idea applies in all different areas, which is the idea of the breath. And they're able to see the great depth of it. It's not just a surface level thing, but they really appreciate the depth of the idea. So this is, we see that there can be two people that learn the same thing, and one person learns it and they understand it and they master it, but they only have the words and the explanation that it says there. And somebody else, they really get the point and they see it, and to the point where they could explain it on their own because they're explaining something that they directly experience. They see the godliness of it. And now, parenthetically, you can have a lower level of this. And this is what we mentioned before, that you have some people that they just get excited because it's spiritual. They're very spiritual people that right away get excited by these kind of things, but it's not really real. They're not really understanding something. They just like these floaty spiritual things. V'hurak dimyin shav, and it's just a false imagination. It's a fantasy. Mikayich hamidam, but from the power of imagination, shebebina, shebenafshe, within the power of understanding of the soul. Shalamata harbe min hasaga, and this is much lower than actual understanding. So you have a lot of people that they'll talk about things, they'll talk about these different words, spiritual words. They'll say it's an energy, it's a light, it's a this, and they just try to visualize that, but it's really completely fake. And this is kind of, you have people that are into this kind of new age spiritual stuff or all these things. They try to latch onto that, use those kind of words and imagery. Maybe they use visualizations or whatever it is. Or some people, they just imagine their angels and letters and all kinds of these ideas. And this is what's warned about very often in learning Kabbalah and Pnimis Torah, that if a person doesn't understand, they don't have the keys to understand the depth of it and really get what it means, then often it can actually be damaging to just imagine that you're understanding something or gaining something when it's fake. So this is, some people get excited right away, but it's a much lower thing and it's really fake. And this leads the person to be deceiving themselves or deceiving others, where they become totally deluded, totally delusional because of these fantasies, because it confuses their mind. Or because the person is very passionate, and so they get just carried away and they start imagining different things, and like they imagine they're seeing angels or having these high spiritual things. To the point where they completely delude themselves. And they think that light is darkness and darkness is light, and they think they're having these great godly experiences, but really it's complete darkness, it's completely delusional. And they completely turn over light for darkness and good for bad, and they mix falseness with truth. There's a little bit of truth there, but there's a lot of falseness, and they make it into whole chulent. It's all mixed together. And so this is the main sign. If somebody is very spiritual and they're using these words, but they can't explain it simply, they can't apply it, so that it's fake. If a person really has something real and they really seeing the godliness of it, then they'll be able to explain it. And unfortunately, this mistake of getting carried away with these kind of fantasies is very common among our brethren. That people imagine that this is a godly inspiration, a godly excitement. They think this is coming from the godly understanding of the idea, that's higher than the intellect, the human intellect aspect of it. Canal, they think, oh, I'm beyond. I don't need the philosophy and the logic and all those understanding explanations. I'm getting the godliness of it. And the difference between what they're experiencing and the true godly understanding, which is higher, is completely incomparable, like light and darkness. Vidaila, maybe that's enough to understand. So this is an important thing to remember and point out. And this is the key point throughout this whole sefer, is that if it's a true inspiration, it's going to come with true understanding on each person's level. But if a person thinks they're having some sort of inspiration or godly connection that's without the understanding, so then it's a fake thing. And the sign for this higher, now we're finished the parentheses, so we're now back talking about somebody that has a true godly appreciation of an idea. That in everything that they learn, every idea, they'll have a very great power to differentiate and notice the little details, because they're able to see the inner distilled depth, the inner idea. And like you see this, for example, the Rebbe's father's diukim and the way the Rebbe explains his father's diukim, where they point out little subtleties that you wouldn't notice and a great depth that's there. And the reason that they're able to notice that and appreciate that is because they have this much deeper understanding. They know what they really understand in a godly level what it's talking about. That they're not just understanding, the person isn't just understanding all of the details and able to repeat it back to you or parrot it back, but they actually get the inner point that's behind everything and they see what it's really trying to express. And because they have this, they see this inner depth, which is like the level of chachma, they're really seeing the godliness of it. In other words, just understanding with human intellect is a level of bina, and seeing the godliness that's abstract and it's really transcends understanding, that's the level of chachma. And when a person has that perception of the godliness, then they have the length, width, and depth of bina in a very great way. That's the idea of like a teacher, that somebody has a lot of experience versus a student. So a student's just learning it from the outside and they just have the explanations and the examples in the book. And from there, they're trying to understand and piece it together. But the person that really knows it, he has the essence of it and he's able to come up with all kinds of examples and mashalim and things like that. And from here, only by having this inner godly tamsis will a person really have the length, width, and depth that they'll be able to explain it simply and apply it in all different ways. And see how one thing relates to something else. Like if you look, for example, in the Tzemach Tzedek's notes on the Kutei Torah, he's comparing this mimer is similar to what it says in another mimer, even though the words aren't necessarily the same, but the theme is the same. And that requires a person really hopping, really getting what's being spoken about. With great breath, the person's able to take any idea they learn in a mime or a sikha. When you really see the godliness of it, you can see, oh, this could apply here and there and there, and you see how it relates to all sorts of other things in other areas of Chassidus, and other areas of Nigla, and in other areas of life. Much, much greater than what he just heard or what he saw written. So this is the sign that the person has this deeper. Some people, they learn it and they can just repeat what it says in the book. And other people, they see it and right away they can see how this idea is all over the place and they can apply it in a great way. And that shows that they have this deeper perception of the godliness. But in contrast, somebody that only understands what he, just the intellectual aspect of it, just what he heard or what he saw written, and he's left just, he could just repeat the words, he can say over the, let's say the mimer or the sikha, and he understands the point, but he doesn't see how it relates to anything else. And even when he'll repeat it, the words are like dead. They're just like clay matter without any form. Like if you, like the difference between you having a block of clay and then if you make it into something, sculpt it into something. So this is just, it's just like the raw material. And the as time goes on, he forgets it and it becomes less and less. The inspiration and the feeling and the sense of understanding becomes less and less because it's not something that he himself is seeing. You learn something, you remember it, but like how much do you remember from your high school algebra class or something like that if you don't use it in life? So it's these kind of things. You can learn it then and you understood it at that time, but it's not something that you personally experience. And so you're not seeing it every day in life. In contrast, let's say an adult, as a person matures, there's certain things that you learn through life. So now you don't need your parents, you don't need to think back, what did my mother tell me how to be safe with fire? Because you actually understand the thing itself and the dangers of it and how to be safe for it and how to use it responsibly. So you yourself can now write the book on how to do it. You don't need to just remember what you were told as a child. So this is the difference. When a person really sees the godliness of it, they see what's being the essence of it, and they can apply it in all different ways. But if somebody doesn't have that, they just have the words and the explanations. And as time goes on, it becomes less and less. And as soon as it's already distant from him a little bit of time, if he hasn't been involved in learning it for a little bit, it becomes completely, he forgets basically everything. And he's only left with the very general idea. Yeah, it was something about this, but you can have that klal, the general idea with the tamsis, with the essence, where he really sees the distilled essence, or you can have it without it. And when you have the general idea without the distilled essence, it's just a very fuzzy general thing where you remember there's something about this idea, but it doesn't really have any meaning or inspiration to it. Adrab, on the contrary, not only does it not have the tamsis, that distilled essence, the godliness, it's all very external. And the idea of being external is that it's not something that I personally see and experience. It's just something that I was told, that the Rebbe told it to me, or I saw it written in a book, or whatever it is. But it's not something that's part of how I see things. So this is the difference. You can see two people can learn Chassidus, and for one person, it's very real and alive, and it's becomes part of them, and they see it in all areas of life. And somebody else, it says it in the book, and right away they start forgetting it, and it's never really part of them. And even if the person will remember it because he's constantly reviewing it and becomes very accustomed to it. Like there's certain things we get used to the idea of why did Neshama come down for a Divrei Tachtainim. We get used to those words and we can say them over and over. But im kolzeh, nevertheless, there's no life in it. It's like, so what? Why do I care? Okay, yeah, I know. Yeah, the neshama is coming down to make a Divrei Tachtainim. Like, but if that doesn't, there's no meaning to those words. They're just empty words. They have no life to them. There's no godly life there. And the idea that it's a godly thing is that you see that this is a real intrinsic thing that has intrinsic value, has real meaning, and you see that it's a creative thing. That you see how this idea could, what it could do for you and for others and things like that. And so this idea is not shining in their understanding of this idea. It's not shining in their soul. It's just like you're remembering something like, oh, you remember what this guy said, you remember what happened. It's just random facts, like people memorize trivia or something. Because the person, even when they learned it and understood it, they never sensed in their soul the godly light of this idea. It's just words, it's just explanations, but you can memorize. It's like people could do intellectual things like solve a puzzle or memorize trivia, but it's really random. If you don't understand it, you could memorize facts about things. But if somebody else would tell you the opposite fact, you'd remember the other way, like a person that's just memorizing formulas for math in school or something. They don't understand why, they don't have intuition to it. So they couldn't invent their own formula. They couldn't prove to you why that's the formula. It's just, I was told to do it this way, so that's why I do it. If you tell me to do it differently, I'll do it differently. So it's a similar thing. It's without any real understanding. Okay, parentheses. V'gam oid yesh bezeh to'os ba'anash. And so there's another type of error, mistake that our brethren fall into, that the Chassidim fall into with this. Sheyeshim ispolim miyad b'bechinas hatamse shebahasagas hahesber v'nidmel lahem shehu bechinas elokus shebahasaga. Some people, it's maybe a little bit better in a way that intellectually they right away get the point of the explanation intellectually, but they mistake that for the godliness of the idea. Al kain la yuchol lizbol hesber klal. And therefore they say they can't tolerate if you try to explain it to them and go, no, I got it. They don't have any interest in going into the details of the explanation. They don't want it at all. They say, yeah, I got it. And if a person really was appreciating the godliness of it, they would want to learn more and relish in every word of the Torah and reviewing it and seeing how it's expressed in this way and that way. And I think maybe an example of this is also sometimes, maybe this is a little different, that it's more just ego, but a person can feel like, oh, I already know. And they go to Shiur or go to Farbrengen and feel like, what do I have to listen? What does this person have to contribute to me? Why should I listen to what they have to say? I already know it. But a person that really, really appreciates the godliness of it, they want to hear it again. They want to see it again. Like we read the Torah again every year, or read the Megillah again every year, and every time it should be new. When a person sees the godliness in it, every time it's with a new life. Or like the Hayim Yim, it says that there was a mimer that was said over and over by the Alter Rebbe, but every time it was new because the Ma'ar is always new. The luminary, the source, when it's the essence, it's always new. Ubazeh yiplu rabim b'to'os hamiduma emes ein zeh me'asogas alokis klal ele mitzad b'chines tivius shemutva b'nefashis Yisrael alokis she'ispalu me'alokus bli tam v'das klal. And really what's going on here, and a lot of people fool themselves with this because they imagine that they're experiencing the godliness, but the truth is this is not a godly understanding. It's just that it's awakening the natural godly affinity that we have, this Av Mesuteres that's in the godly soul of every Jew as a nature. And it's not based, and this doesn't require, it's just awakening their emunah, their faith, which is higher than reason. It's not based on any reasons. They don't need to understand it. So therefore, sometimes you learn something and it will awaken that feeling of that godly emunah, which is a good thing. You want to wake that up, but you want to bring the emunah b'pnimius. We want to internalize that emunah by bringing it into understanding, and that requires this work to actually learn and understand the things. But if a person is just satisfied with saying, "Oh, I just feel it. It's a godly thing, and I'm inspired. My emunah's woken up," but they're not bringing it into the understanding, so then it's not really going to change them. V'hu b'chinas katnos to nefesh, and this just emuna, where it's just the emuna without any understanding, that's called the level of the immaturity of the soul, but it's of the godly soul. Madrega hacharena shebenaran chai the nefesh kiss. She's bar, and this is the lowest level of the nefesh neshama chai yechida of the godly soul that we're going to explain soon. Ubelashon Yiddish frumkeit tivis. This is what's called the natural frumkeit. So you have a lot of people think they're satisfied with that, the fact that they learn something and it does connect, they feel connected to it because their godly soul gets woken up by it, but then they stop and they don't want to do the avodah to actually work to really understand it and really internalize it, really make it part of them. And then it's not going to have the proper effect to really change a person's the way they think, the way they feel, and the way they act. What we're talking about here, when a person has the sensitivity to sense the godliness of the idea, this is what's called the sensitivity of the Chassidus, of this understanding, which is the inner hiyuli of it, it's the inner essence of it, Yiddish essentia. Like when you make an essence of something, let's say you have almond extract or vanilla extract. So you take a flavor and you boil it down until it's a very strong perfume or a very strong flavoring. And you use that to mix a lot of other drinks. Like you could buy concentrated apple juice or orange juice or things like that. Kidu, as is known, or like Zechzeneinzig, or Everclear is 95%, almost pure alcohol. You can use that to mix to make other drinks. All these are similar types of things. And that is called the simple hiyuli chaymer, the simple essential matter that everything is made from. And so just like with that idea that when you have this distilled essence, that's the source you can make a lot of it from. So when a person has the sensitivity to the chassidus, they're getting the real depth, the idea, the chachma of it. They're seeing it in its source, and therefore they appreciate the explanations, and they can give the explanations. And that's very different from a person that is having their emunah woken up, but they're not seeing it in this level of chachma, and therefore they're not going to understand. And if they're not motivated to understand, then it's actually could be a problem that a person is stopping himself from doing the avodah they're supposed to do. Okay. Umeyata yuvad me'ein dugmas richuk erech hispailas hesber legabi hispailas al kusha behesber. Now that we understand with this introduction, we can have an appreciation of how big of a difference there is from a person that's getting inspired just from the logic, the human intellect, versus a person that's getting inspired by the godliness of it. It's kind of like the difference between a kid that's excited because they're gonna do something and they're gonna win a prize and win a lollipop or freeze pop or a sticker or something like that, versus the adult that's excited that they worked hard and they actually learned something. Let's say like the Chidon, where they learn all the Sefer mitzvahs from the Rambam and things like that. So you could be excited for the trip, right? It's a very external thing, but you're not appreciating the real value of it, as opposed to a person that appreciates the real value of what they're learning and what they're accomplishing. So it's a similar kind of thing here. A person could learn a mimer or learn a sikha, and they just know the words and they could explain it. They could say it over as a dvar Torah. But then there's a person that really sees this as a living thing, and if this could really change my life, and this is a tremendous, and they see how this could be applied in all different ways. So Yeser hu richo ka'erech kol ikar hispailas al kush sheb hasaga sheb nefesh tivis legabi hispailas al kush sheb hasaga sheb nefesh kiss. And how great this difference is, that the whole godly inspiration in the understanding of the natural soul compared to the godly inspiration in the same understanding of the godly soul. They're very, very far apart. So this inspiration and this understanding of the natural soul is just like a garment. It's just a lavush that inside of it it's able to contain the excitement of the godly soul, and it's covering over it and hiding it. And so in a similar way, the pleasure, the enjoyment, the desire and the enjoyment of the natural soul, like a lavush, they're a garment for the desire and the pleasure of the godly soul. So for example, you can have a person that's appreciating Shabbos, And so to make it special, you have physical treats. Like, for example, you're celebrating a special day, a birthday or something like that. So you get a cake. So somebody that's not so mature, they just appreciate the cake, right? Maybe a little kid, that's what they are focused on. They don't, but inside that, they feel that their parents love them and their friends care about them and their family, and that's why they're celebrating. But they're mainly appreciating the cake and the presents, and that's inside of there is hidden that inner sense of love and connection, as opposed to somebody that's mature, like hopefully like the parents and things like that. They're mainly appreciating, they want to show the kid that they're special and they love them, and they're finding a lavush for it to express it with the cake and the presents. So in a similar thing, the logic, the human intellect and logic and all these kind of things, and are all just a lavush for what's really going on for the godliness. Like we said before, this is similar to the difference between the pleasure and under physical pleasure and physical understanding compared to the soul's spiritual pleasure and spiritual understanding in Gan Eden, where it has nothing to do with anything in the physical world. ונמצא הגם שבוודאי מצד עצם הערך הרי גם בכינס היסר האחרונה שבנפש הלקיס שהוא כמו בכינס הקטנוס ביסר וספיילוס העצמי בנפש הלקיס בכינס עשייה למשך אחרי הלקוס בלי טעם כמו ביציאת מצרים דכסיב לך לך במדבר חולו כתין כשילך אחר אביב חולו. So it comes out that certainly when we want to compare the quality of the godly soul to the natural soul, even the lowest level of the godly soul, which is the most immature expression of it, which is where a person has this innate godly inspiration only expressed in action. So their natural kiss, their natural connection to God that's higher than any reason, that's coming from their essence, is expressed just that they want to do godly things. Like we said, this natural frumkeit, they just want to do what Hashem wants without any reason. Like when we left Mitzrayim, that it says we followed after Hashem into the desert, like a child that just naturally follows after their father or their mother because they feel connected. They don't understand anything, but they're just going to follow them around and they want to stay close to them. So the same thing, we don't have any understanding, but we know we want to be close to Hashem, whatever that means. But this simple, sincere, so a very simple person, or even a child that just has the simple sincerity to want to do Torah mitzvahs out of, they don't even know what they're doing or why it's important. They just know that I'm a Jew and therefore I want to do it. You know, you can meet somebody in Mitzrayim and they just say, oh, I want to put on tefillin, I want to shake lulav, and they just feel I'm a Jew. They were inspired. They saw the sign of the mitzvah tank and it inspired them to connect to that. That's coming from this godly soul, kiyadua. So this simple inspiration in the most immature way of a simple Jew is much greater than even the highest, most sophisticated inspiration of the natural soul, where a person really understands everything philosophically and they can explain it to you, but it's all just in human intellect. So it's lacking that godly characteristic. And that's this inner ratzon that's higher than a reason, that's called the kavana, where a person is really, their whole passion in life is learning Torah, let's say, and they want to, you know, they just have a big geschmack in it, but it's only be expressed in that kind of a detached way, where it's not really a godly thing. But nevertheless, even though the lowest level of the godly soul is much higher than even the highest level of the natural animal soul, nevertheless, the godly kaiches, the 10 kaiches, the chabad, chagas, nahi, the intellect and emotions of the godly soul go into the kaiches of the natural soul as a levush, as a garment. Tainug b'tainug, ratzon b'ratzon, seicha v'seicha, midas b'midas, chulu kiyadua. The pleasure of the godly soul is expressed in the levush of the pleasure of the natural soul, and the desire in the desire, the intellect in the intellect, the emotions in the emotions, etc., as is known. And so therefore, when a person does avodah with their natural soul, the godly soul is able to refine the natural soul and be revealed within it, and it's on its corresponding level. And so therefore, when the godly soul, in the understanding and the inspiration is coming from the understanding of the natural soul. When a person just learns something, explains something on the level of their human intellect, inside of that is the godly understanding of the godly soul. Ad sharsha basago bina shaba b'yaisa nen is miziv b'ganeden, and that the part of the godly soul that comes down into the body is connected to the godly soul the way it's above in Gan Eden. And so even that is being expressed and turned on through this learning and this thinking. Kanal be'inyan ach betzel mishalach ish, like it explains, we were saying previously about this idea that a person should go in the tzelem. The tzelem is the godly soul, like it says, bitzalmenu kids meusenu. The tzelem is the godly soul, and the dmus is the animal soul, and the tzelem goes into the dmus. Dekoy al neshama shemulubeshes beguf kedua, and this tzelem refers to the level of the godly soul that comes down into the body, into the animal soul. And the difference between just the and natural soul's understanding versus the godly soul that's melubash, that's within the animal soul we explained previously. It's like the difference between an essential light or the light that's only being expressed through some sort of garment, through a curtain, where it's indirect. Or like a person that's appreciating the inner essence of the idea, and that is only being right now hidden and expressed within the logic of it, like we said before. So this is the idea that we have these three levels. We have the essence of the godly soul, the way it is in Gan Eden, and then we have the level of the godly soul that comes down into the animal soul, and that's called the tzelem. And then we have the animal soul itself. And so within each level of the animal soul is Malubash, this light of the godly soul, and the person can be learning and be inspired on a level where it's mainly the natural soul that's being inspired, or they can also plug that into the godly soul and have it be inspired on this deeper godly level within the animal soul itself. Achadayin yesh lahabin ma'u mechus haspilus elokus shebasagas haneshama hamuvdol be'erech me'aspilus hasaga denefshativis kulu kanal. But we still need to understand what is the nature of the godly soul's inspiration that is completely removed from the understanding of the nefesh hativis. Because, like we said, there's a godly soul the way it's in Gan Eden that's completely higher than the body. But first we need another explanation. What is the nature of the inspiration of the godly soul? Because the godly soul is literally a piece of God. It's literally a spark of godliness, a piece of God. And so therefore, this idea that we're going to explain now is that the godly soul, its inspiration is completely intrinsic. It's inspired because it is godly, and therefore it naturally loves godliness because that's what it is, as opposed to the animal soul. It's a body. The body is trying to survive. It's trying to enjoy life, and it can appreciate godliness if it's a means to an end to help it achieve what it cares about and what it wants. But it's something that's external to it. And so the inspiration of the godly soul transcends completely above and beyond the nature of the inspiration of the natural soul. And the difference between them is in this fact that the godly soul's inspiration is an intrinsic, essential godly inspiration. It's being inspired by the godliness itself because it's godly, and therefore it loves godliness for no reason. It doesn't need a reason. It just likes it because that's what it is. And it's not an inspiration of something that's separate from you that you appreciate because it's doing something for you. And like we say in the pasuk, literally my bones or my whole essence calls out, this is my very essence. And so this is the main difference, that when a person's connecting on the level of the godly soul, it's lishma, it's just intrinsic. I want to know the truth because it's true and do what's right because it's right. Like Rambam says, it's not for any reason. It's not based on a cheshbon. I'm not thinking about it. It's just like, what do you mean? This is who I am. How can I not do this? Because godliness for it is a completely essential and natural thing. Because that's where its entire being, its whole identity, its whole nature comes from. Blushing Yiddish, Getliche Hispaalus nit menschliche Hispaalus is a godly inspiration, not a human mortal inspiration. Tahainu di neshama vermispo nit der guf. The soul is being inspired, not the body. Gam hanikra der hert. Pirush di neshama der hert. And so even here, when we say that I understand it as personally relevant, here we mean that the soul feels that I connect to it personally on the level of my soul, not just on the level of my body. And we call this a soul der herenish, a feeling, a personal connection on the level of the soul. That's a completely different level of connection. And a simple example of this is the difference between a person that's serving God and appreciating that God is giving me health and wealth and money, or I'm going to get reward in Gan Eden, Olam Haba, and all these things. Those are all external, and it's all based on a calculation, as opposed to where a person feels that this is what I am, and therefore I just love it. I don't need a reason. It's just great. Ukumai hispilus hamalachim hanikroim b'nei elukim shebevadis balusam rak hispilus eluki bilvad. Getlecha hispilus. Like, for example, the inspiration of the angels, which are called the children of God. Certainly, their inspiration is a godly inspiration. They don't have any bodily needs. Ukumai shanefesh ativis tispol min yanim gufanim b'bchinis atzmius. And just like the body, you don't need to have a reason. Why do you like a cookie? Because what do you mean? It's just because it's good. It's geschmack. Because the body naturally is inspired and cares about physical things in a way that's essential, vitivis, and it's essential to it, it's intrinsic, and it's natural to it. It's not based, you don't have to learn and teach yourself to like delicious things. Kimisham like kacha, because that's where it comes from. Kach mamish is spilus nefshel kis mein yane elukus b'chol prateim b'chinis asmus vitivis. And this is the main difference, that the godly soul also, it appreciates godliness intrinsically and naturally. This is what it is, and it's not based on any reason. It's just an essential, intrinsic, natural thing. And therefore we must say this. We can't say that the godly soul should be inspired or care about any sort of physical things. Like food, because it completely transcends. It's devoid of any connection to physical needs and physical pleasures. So when people like want to describe Gan Eden and Olam Haba in physical terms, like Rambam says, it's like a foolish thing. What do you think the soul cares about sitting and eating and drinking and things like that? And in a similar way, like Rambam also explains there, that it is just as distant for the natural soul, the bodily soul, to be inspired from godly things, because it doesn't have any connection to them. Therefore takes intense effort for it to train itself to be able to care about godly things. But it is possible for the natural animal soul to appreciate godliness because it comes from kupas naiga, and naiga's source is also in godliness. It's created from godliness, and so when it appreciates through thinking about it, it's able to realize actually this is really who I am and where I come from, and therefore this is what's going to make me successful, and therefore I should care about godliness. Because godliness creates everything. But this godliness is in a very hidden way within the natural soul and in the physical world, and therefore it's very hard. It takes a lot of effort to get a person to be inspired by that and appreciate it. And so certainly the godly soul is completely devoid of any physical inspiration or any natural things like this. It's only that it's mislabish in it like a lavush. So it's able to appreciate, it appreciates godliness. It's able to appreciate that God creates everything and gives us life, gives us health, and that's an expression of godliness, but it doesn't really care about those things on their own, like a parent doesn't really care about the stickers and the tickets and the prizes. They're just using that to express the importance of the learning or their love for the child, their intrinsic love. Even the fact that we see that the godly soul will also be inspired when the natural soul is inspired by godliness on any of these 5 levels that we talked about, whether it's just in thought, just with a haidah, just acknowledging it, or with some sort of commitment to do it, or with love and fear, or the kavanah, the ratzon and tainug that's higher than intellect. Those levels of nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. This is the main difference between them. To be nefesh ativis, who hakol b'chinis aspilus nivdelas me'etzem elokus. That with the way you can tell which one it is, that when it's the natural soul getting inspired, it is being inspired in a way of something that's indirect and it's separate from the essence of godliness. It doesn't appreciate the intrinsic value of the godliness. It appreciates some sort of benefit that comes to the person from it. Vespilus nefesh elokis, who hispilus atzmis mitzad etzem elokus. But the godly soul is inspired by the godliness itself. It appreciates it intrinsically. And this is something that's just rooted and implanted in the nature of the godly soul, that it's just completely natural for it to love and appreciate godliness. And because the godly soul also is made up of these 5 levels, nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida, and it is clothed within the nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida of the natural soul. And in general, this idea of the desire, the intellect, the emotions, and the 3 garments of thought, speech, and action. And therefore, even though really it's all just this essential godly thing, but because it's being expressed in these different levushim, these different levels, therefore this expression of the godly soul now also has the idea of katnus, of godless, of being less mature and more mature, even though really the idea of maturity is only something that would apply when a person doesn't appreciate the intrinsic value of something, and therefore they have to work to convince themselves and to come to appreciate it. So the godly soul doesn't have to do that, but nevertheless, it could be revealed on lower levels or higher levels, even though the essential godliness is always from the yechid, that's always from the essence, and is always completely natural. But we can speak about a less mature and more mature revelation of the godly soul based on what level of the nefesh tivus is able to be revealed within. And so it really has to do with the refinement of the nefesh tivus. Al derech shanu royim, like we see, hischalkos madregas benefesh tivus kshetachpaitz bekiris elokim kanal, just like we see these different levels in the natural soul, in what level it's inspired and what level it once desires the closest to godliness, to God, like we said before. So just if we describe the 5 levels of the nefesh tivus, we're going to see that you have a similar 5 levels in the godly soul. But once you're on any of these 5 levels of the godly soul, once you're turned on this level, that's called serving God with your soul. It's not called just serving God with your body. I'm not sure if that's a typo. Maybe I think it's supposed to be Hashem Chaim Chulu. That you that are connected to the living God, Dveikim and Mela, you're automatically connected. Bechinis atzmius, betivius. In other words, when we say this idea of having dveikos, being connected to godliness, this is referring to the godly soul. It's just a natural intrinsic connection. Like we explained previously about this general difference between a godly inspiration and a human, mortal, fleshy inspiration. And even the lowest level of the godly soul, even just the nefesh of asiya, yesh gam bechinis yechida the nefesh l'kis shabai. There is this ray, this shine of the yechida of the godly soul that's shining in. Shu bechinis eskashas atzmius, which is this essential connection on derech shamar Rashbi, like the Rashbi said, b'chag etiris katarna, with one knot I am tied to you. So even the simplest Jew, and this is the idea, like we see the Baal Shem Tov loved the simple Jews, he loved this expression of the yechida being expressed in every person, even the simplest person. And sometimes the godly soul was more expressed in the simple people, and the very sophisticated people were more refined and more sophisticated in terms of their natural soul, but they weren't necessarily turned on and plugged into their godly soul. And this yechida that the Rashbi embodied is the highest level. Because the how much this godly soul is able to be revealed and manifest, it can come in many different levels depending on how refined the natural soul is, what it is a keli for. If it's a keli just to reveal the godly soul level of nefesh, or ruach, neshama, chai, yechida, like we'll see. But whatever level it's on, even on the simplest level, it's really expressing this essential connection of even the greatest tzaddik.